Lyra's heart pounded as she stepped deeper into the jungle of the strange planet she had crash-landed on. The towering trees loomed over her, their branches thick and twisted, casting long shadows across the ground. It was hard to tell where. The light ended and the darkness began. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch made her pause, listening for danger. She had no idea where she was or how far she had traveled from the wreckage of her ship. The only thing Lyra knew was that she had to keep moving. She had to survive. She had been traveling with a small group of explorers, sent from her home planet, but after the crash, she had found herself alone. The others were either dead or scattered, and the only thing she could rely on was her own strength and will to survive. The planet was not kind. The wildlife here was unlike anything she had ever seen, monstrous and dangerous. She had encountered strange creatures with sharp teeth and glowing eyes that stalked her from the shadows. She had barely escaped more than one close call, and her resources were running low. The jungle was alive with threats at every turn, but Lyra was determined to find a way off this planet. Her communicator was broken, and her food supplies were dwindling. She had no choice but to keep moving, hoping to find something that might lead her to safety. As she walked, the ground became softer and the air thicker. It was a warning. She knew it. She had seen this kind of plant before. The jungle was filled with dangerous flora, some of it carnivorous. Lyra had been trained for situations like this, but she wasn't prepared for what was coming. She heard a soft, unsettling sound. It was a low hum, almost like the plant itself was breathing. Her eyes darted around, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. It was too quiet, too still. Then before she could react, the ground beneath her feet shifted. A massive, vine-covered form erupted from the ground, wrapping around her legs. The plant's tendrils were thick and strong, pulling her closer to the earth. Lyra fought to break free, kicking and twisting, but it was no use. The plant's grasp tightened with every movement she made, its vines cutting into her skin. She screamed, but no one would hear her. No one was coming. She was alone. Her body was pulled lower, her feet lifting off the ground. The plant seemed to know exactly how to feed. Lyra struggled harder, her breathing quick and shallow. She could feel her energy being drained, the plant drawing her closer, its enormous petals opening wide as if it had been waiting for her. In her panic, Lyra thought about her home. She thought about the people she had left behind, the world she would never see again. The plant's power grew stronger, and she felt weaker. She could barely keep her eyes open, her head spinning. Was this it? Was she going to die here on this strange planet, devoured by a plant she had only heard about in stories? Lyra's fingers curled into fists, fighting against the plant's grip, but it was futile. She felt the edges of her consciousness begin to fade. But just as she thought she could fight no more, she saw something, a figure through the thick foliage, a flash of movement. It was a human. She wasn't sure at first, but the silhouette was unmistakable. A human. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had almost given up hope of ever seeing another living being again. But here was someone who might save her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't make a sound as the plant pulled her closer. Then, the figure moved forward, stepping into the clearing. It was a man, tall and strong-looking, dressed in a dark uniform. He carried a strange weapon, something she had never seen before. His eyes locked onto hers as he assessed the situation. He was calm, his expression focused as he quickly analyzed the plant, the danger, and the girl trapped within. Lyra tried to call out, but her voice was weak. All she could manage was a quiet whisper, "Help." The human man Jack stepped closer, his eyes scanning the plant. He had been sent to rescue stranded explorers, and he had found Lyra just in time. But the situation wasn't simple. The plant was massive, its roots deeply embedded in the ground, and it was pulling her down into the earth at an alarming rate. Jack had faced countless dangers in his career, but nothing like this. He knew the planet was full of life, but he never imagined he would find something like this, an alien girl being devoured by a monstrous plant. His mind raced as he quickly formulated a plan. He couldn't waste time. Lyra was in danger, and there wasn't a moment to lose. Jack raised his weapon, aiming it at the plant's center, but he hesitated. The last thing he wanted was to damage the girl in the process. He could see the fear in her eyes, her body trembling as she was pulled deeper into the plant's maw. He had no idea where to start, but he couldn't stand by and let her die. Jack's hand tightened on his weapon as he made his move. There was no time for hesitation, no time to think. It was a simple choice: save her or let the plant win. Lyra's body was nearly halfway inside the plant now, and it was starting to close in around her, its petals reaching for her face. Her heart was pounding, and she could barely keep her eyes open. The world around her was fading, the sounds of the jungle drowning out as the plant's grip tightened. Then, just as everything seemed lost, the human made his move. Jack stood still, his eyes locked on the massive plant, calculating every possible move in his mind. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. Every second that passed, Lyra was sinking deeper into the plant's deadly grasp. Her body was already halfway inside, and the plant's massive petals were closing in, its vines pulling tighter around her legs and waist. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear, struggling for every breath. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he took a step forward, carefully positioning himself just out of the plant's reach. He was no stranger to danger, having spent years in the harshest environments, but this was different. This wasn't just a monster he could shoot or a quick escape. This was something far more insidious. He had to think smarter, not just fight. Harder. He raised his weapon again, a high-tech cutting tool designed to slice through the toughest materials. It wasn't meant for something like this, but it was all he had. He aimed at the root of the plant, its thick tendrils wrapping around Lyra like iron chains. He pulled the trigger, and the weapon hummed to life, releasing a high-frequency energy blast. The plant shuddered, its vines recoiling slightly, but it didn't release its grip on Lyra. Jack's stomach churned as he saw Lyra's face, pale and desperate, her breath shallow. She wasn't going to last much longer if he didn't do something fast. "Hey, stay with me," Jack shouted, his voice sharp and urgent, but Lyra couldn't respond. She was too weak, too close to losing consciousness. He gritted his teeth, his mind racing for another plan. The plant hissed like a giant, breathing creature, and Jack could feel its power, its hunger radiating in the air. It was alive, intelligent even, knowing exactly how to trap its prey. It wasn't just about eating. It was about survival. And right now, Lyra was nothing more than a meal waiting to be consumed. Jack's eyes scanned the area, looking for something that could help him. His hands gripped his weapon tighter, but the more he thought, the more he realized that brute force alone wouldn't work. He couldn't just shoot his way out of this. He needed to think like the plant. It wasn't just using force. It was using the environment around it. Jack's gaze shifted, and that's when he saw it. A pile of rocks, several feet away, scattered along the edge of the clearing. He wasn't sure how much time he had left, but it was a shot. He quickly calculated the distance and moved toward the rocks, his feet moving silently across the jungle. Floored. As he approached, he picked up a large stone, heavy and jagged. He could feel the sweat beading on his forehead as he took aim. With a grunt, Jack hurled the stone at the plant's base, where the tendrils were thickest. The rock hit with a loud thud, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the plant trembled. Its roots loosened for just a split second, the tendrils weakening. Jack didn't hesitate. He sprinted back to Lyra, using all his strength to pull her free from the plant's clutches. But it was stronger than he realized. The plant fought back, the tendrils tightening once more, pushing Jack back with a force he hadn't expected. Come on, come on." Jack grunted, his muscles straining as he pulled harder, dragging Lyra with him. But the plant wasn't done. It roared in frustration, its petals snapping shut as it tried to swallow Lyra whole. For a moment, Jack thought they wouldn't make it. He thought he would fail. He had failed so many times before. He had seen friends die, seen teammates lost. But this time, it couldn't end like that. Not here, not now. Not for her. Jack dug his heels into the ground and pulled harder. He felt the plant's grip slip just a little. That was enough. With a final burst of strength, he yanked Lyra free, dragging her away from the plant's deadly reach. They fell. To the ground, both gasping for air. Lyra's body was limp in his arms, her chest rising and falling with labored breaths. She wasn't unconscious, but she wasn't far from it. Jack looked down at her, his heart racing as he checked for any injuries. Her clothes were torn, her skin scratched and bruised, but she was alive. For now, he could hear the plant hissing behind him, its anger palpable. It wasn't finished yet. It was still coming for them. Jack had no time to waste. He grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her to her feet, using all his strength to support her. "We have to go," Jack said, his voice low but firm. Lyra barely nodded, her eyes barely focusing on him. She was in shock, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. But Jack didn't care. He had to keep her moving. There was no time to waste. Together, they stumbled through the dense jungle, Jack dragging her along. The plant's screeches echoed behind them, growing louder with each step. Jack's pulse raced as he glanced over his shoulder, knowing the plant wasn't far behind. They had to get out of the clearing, get to safety, or they would never survive. Jack's mind was running on overdrive as he thought about the next steps. The jungle was a labyrinth, full of dangers. He needed to find shelter, a place where they could regroup, a place where they wouldn't be chased down like prey. Lyra's legs wobbled beneath her, her body barely able to support her weight. But she was still alive, and that was what mattered. She had been pulled from the jaws of death, but she wasn't out of danger yet. "We'll make it," Jack muttered to himself, even though he wasn't sure if he believed it. The jungle had a way of turning hope into despair. But he wouldn't let it take her. Not this time. Lyra's breathing slowed, and she managed to speak, her voice weak but determined. "Thank you." Jack didn't respond at first. He couldn't. He was too focused on getting them both out of there. The plant's screams grew louder, but Jack refused to turn around. He couldn't afford to. Every step they took was a step toward safety, toward survival. That was the only thing that mattered. They didn't know where they were going, but they knew they had to keep moving. Keep fighting. And for now that was enough. Jack pulled Lyra along as the jungle seemed to close in around them. His breath was ragged, sweat stinging his eyes, but he couldn't afford to slow down. The plant wasn't finished yet. He could hear it behind them, its massive tendrils thrashing through the trees, hissing with rage as it chased after its lost meal. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, the dense underbrush making every step a challenge, but Jack didn't care. He wasn't stopping. Not for anything. Lyra was barely holding herself up, her face pale, eyes glassy, but she was still alive. That's all that mattered. He couldn't lose her now. He glanced at her, his grip tight around her wrist as he tugged her forward. "We're almost there," Jack said, though he had no idea where there was. He didn't know this part of the jungle. The crash site had been hours away. They were completely off course, but he didn't have the luxury to worry about that now. His only focus was getting them away from the plant, getting them to safety. Lyra's breathing was shallow, and she stumbled beside him, too weak to keep up. Jack felt a pang of guilt. He should have been faster. He should have done more. But there was no time for regrets. They had to keep moving. The plant's cries were growing louder, its roots crashing through the jungle like a wild beast hunting for its prey. Jack's heart skipped a beat when he heard the telltale rustle of its vines slithering closer, closer. They weren't far behind. If they didn't find shelter soon, They wouldn't make it. Jack pushed through the dense trees, his mind working fast, searching for anything that might offer them protection. His eyes scanned the area, looking for a cave, a cliff, something that could block the plant's path. The jungle was alive with sound, the screeches of unknown creatures, the calls of birds he couldn't see, but none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was survival. Then he saw it. A massive rock outcrop towering above the jungle floor. It was a natural formation, jagged and tall, with an opening at its base. A cave, a small one, but it was enough. It was their only chance. Jack yanked Lyra forward, his legs aching from the sprint, and they finally reached the rock formation. He pulled her inside the cave, just as the plant's screeches echoed closer. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and Jack could hear the plant crashing through the trees behind them. They were inside. For now, they were safe, but Jack didn't relax. Not for a second. He knew this was just a temporary solution. The plant would find them sooner or later. He could feel its presence, the way the air seemed to vibrate with its anger. The plant wasn't just a creature. It was a force of nature, a living thing with a mind of its own. And right now, it was hunting them. Jack's breathing slowed as he turned to Lyra. She was sitting against the cave wall, her face drawn and pale, her eyes closed. He knelt beside her, checking her pulse. It was steady, but weak. She was exhausted, and her body had taken a beating. She wasn't out of danger yet. "Lyra," Jack whispered, gently shaking her shoulder. "Lyra, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open, and she blinked up at him, disoriented. For a moment, she didn't seem to recognize him, her gaze distant. Then her eyes cleared, and she whispered, I thought I was dead." "No," Jack said softly, his voice reassuring. "You're alive. We're safe for now." Lyra blinked again, her breath shaky. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. Jack helped her, steadying her as she found her balance. I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice weak but filled with gratitude. "I thought it was the end." Jack shook his head, not wanting to focus on that now. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "We're not out of danger yet. We have to keep moving when the time comes." Lyra nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. But there was something else in her eyes, something Jack couldn't quite place. She was grateful, yes, but there was a deeper emotion, fear, yes, but also curiosity. Jack had seen it before in people who had been through something like this. She was beginning to realize something. "What kind of plant was that?" Lyra asked, her voice hoarse. "I've never seen anything like it before. I didn't even know plants could be alive like that." Jack sighed, his mind still racing. "It's not just a plant," he said. "It's something different, something dangerous." He sat down beside her, his back against the cold stone of the cave. The darkness inside the cave was heavy, but it was better than the danger outside. For now, it was enough. They needed rest, but Jack knew they couldn't afford to sleep for long. The plant was still out there, and it was hungry. "We can't stay here forever," Jack said. "But we need a plan." Lyra nodded, her eyes focused as she tried to gather her strength. Jack could tell she was more resilient than she seemed. She wasn't just an alien girl in need of rescue, she was a survivor. Like him, she had her own way of facing the world. "Do you have any weapons?" Lyra asked, her voice soft but steady. "Anything that can help us fight it?" Jack hesitated. He had his cutting tool, but it wasn't enough to kill the plant. It might slow it down, but it wouldn't stop it. "Not for good." "I've got a weapon," he said, reaching into his pack and pulling out the small handheld device. "It's not much, but it's better than nothing." Lyra studied it carefully. "It might not be enough," she said, her voice thoughtful. "We need something bigger. Something to take down the plant once and for all." Jack looked at her, surprised by her confidence. "You have an idea?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I do. We need to find its weak spot. Plants like that, There's always a way to kill them. We just need to figure out where it's vulnerable. Jack's mind raced. She was right. There had to be a way. He'd been fighting creatures and surviving on this planet for years, but he had never faced something like this. Maybe together they could figure it out. For now, though, they had to wait. They had to rest. They couldn't move too soon. The plant was out there waiting. But for now, they were safe. And that, at least, was a start. Jack and Lyra sat in the dark cave, listening to the rustling sounds of the jungle outside. The air was thick with the scent of the wet, damp earth, and the low hum of the carnivorous plant could still be heard faintly in the distance. The jungle was alive with danger, but the plant, it seemed, had stopped its pursuit. For now, Lyra was sitting against the cave wall, her eyes focused but tired. She had been through so much in such a short time. The crash, the isolation, and then the near-death encounter with the plant. But Jack could see the strength in her. Despite the exhaustion that weighed her down, she wasn't just an alien. She was a fighter, just like him. Jack, on the other hand, was no stranger to danger. He had been in tight spots before, but this was different. This planet wasn't like the others. There was something about it, something that felt alive almost. Unnatural. The plant wasn't just a creature of hunger. It was a force of nature. Jack could sense it, feel it in his bones. The plant had a mind of its own, and it wouldn't stop until it had what it wanted. "We need to move," Jack said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was urgency in his words. He didn't like the idea of staying in the cave too long. It was too quiet, too still. The plant might not be hunting them at the moment, but Jack knew it wouldn't rest. It couldn't. Lyra didn't look at him right away, her hands still shaking slightly. She had been in shock since the rescue, but she was starting to regain some of her composure. Finally, she looked up at Jack, meeting his eyes. "I can't believe you pulled me out of that thing," she said quietly. I thought it was the end. I thought I was going to die." Jack felt a pang of guilt. He had been so focused on getting her out of the plant's grasp that he hadn't had time to think about what she had gone through. He had seen it all before, people who had faced death, the shock and the fear that followed. But there was something different about Lyra. Her will to survive was strong. Stronger than he had expected. "We're not out of it yet," Jack replied, his voice steady. "We need to move before the plant comes back." Lyra nodded slowly, her body still sore from the plant's tight grip. "Where do we go?" Jack looked out the mouth of the cave, his eyes scanning the jungle. The sky was starting to turn dark, the thick trees blocking out most of the light, but there was still time. They couldn't stay here long. The plant could be closing in on them again, and Jack had no intention of waiting for it to strike. "We head west," Jack said. "There's a clearing about a mile from here. It's risky, but it's the best chance we've got." Lyra looked uncertain. "West? Do you know what's there?" Jack hesitated for a moment. He didn't know for sure, but it was the only direction that made sense. If they kept moving, they might find a way out of this jungle, a way to escape the planet's deadly embrace. But it was also a gamble. The jungle was unpredictable. The clearing could be a trap, or it could be a way to safety. Jack wasn't sure, but it was their best option. "We'll have to trust our instincts," Jack said, standing up and offering his hand to Lyra. "We don't have a choice." Lyra took his hand, rising to her feet with Jack's help. She winced, her body still aching from the plant's hold, but she didn't show it. She was determined, just like Jack. Together, they made their way out of the cave, stepping back into the dark, dangerous jungle. The air was thick with humidity, the ground slick beneath their feet as they moved forward. Every sound, every rustle in the bushes made them tense, but they kept moving. They didn't speak much as they walked. Words weren't necessary right now. The jungle had a way of making everything feel urgent. Every step had to count as they moved deeper into the jungle. The plant's presence was still heavy in the air. Jack could feel it, like a dark cloud hanging over them. The plant was out there, somewhere, waiting for its chance to strike again. He could hear its distant calls, its low, guttural sounds that sent shivers down his spine. It wasn't just hunting, it was calling them, beckoning them closer. Jack quickened his pace, pulling Lyra along. The sound of the plant grew louder, more intense, like a predator closing in on its prey. He could hear the rustling of its vines as they moved through the jungle. Searching, tracking them down. They couldn't outrun it. It was too fast, too powerful. They needed to fight it. But how? Jack didn't have the answer yet. He didn't know enough about the plant. But he knew one thing for sure: they couldn't stop. Not yet. We're almost there, Jack said, his voice strained as he pushed through the thick underbrush. He could see the faint outline of the clearing ahead, just beyond the trees. But it wasn't close enough. The plant's cries were growing. Louder. Jack could feel it getting closer. They were running out of time. Suddenly, the jungle erupted with noise. Jack barely had time to react. A thick vine shot out from the shadows, slamming into his chest with the force of a freight train. He stumbled backward, his feet slipping on the wet ground as he tried to keep his balance. The vine coiled around him, tightening like a rope. He grunted in pain as it squeezed harder, pinning him to the ground. Lyra screamed, trying to pull Jack free, but the plant's grip was too strong. Jack could feel the vine tightening around his body, cutting off his breath. His vision blurred as he gasped for air, the plant's massive petals looming above him, ready to consume him whole. Jack! Lyra's voice echoed in his ears. Her panic rising, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't pull the vine off him alone. Jack was trapped. In that moment, as the plant closed in on him, Jack knew one thing: he had to survive. He couldn't give up now. Not for Lyra, not for himself. With all the strength he could muster, Jack grabbed his weapon. His hand shook as he aimed it at the vine. Just as it was about to pull him into the plant's center, he fired the energy. Blast cutting through the vine's thick surface. The vine recoiled, releasing its grip on Jack's chest. He didn't wait. He grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her toward him as he stood, panting for breath. The plant shrieked in frustration, but Jack didn't look back. They were almost there. The clearing was within reach. With a final push, they reached the clearing, and Jack knew they had only moments before the plant caught up. The race wasn't over yet. But at least for now, they were one step closer to survival. The clearing ahead was just in sight, but Jack could hear the plant's roar behind them. It was louder now, its vines crashing through the jungle, thrashing wildly as it hunted them down. The massive petals were closing in, ready to snatch them back into its deadly embrace. Jack could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he dragged Lyra along, her steps unsteady but determined. They couldn't stop now, not when they were so close. Almost there, Jack muttered, his voice tight with effort. Keep going. Lyra, the weak, was holding on. Her face was pale, her breath coming in shallow gasps, but there was something in her eyes that told Jack she wasn't ready to give up. She wasn't just running away from the plant. She was fighting back. They reached the edge of the clearing, where the trees broke apart to reveal open space. It was their chance to escape. They had to cross the open ground and get to the other side, where the rocky hills could offer them some kind of shelter. But the plant wasn't far behind. Jack could see the huge, vine-covered mass pushing through the underbrush, its roots moving with terrifying speed. Lyra stumbled again, and this time, Jack wasn't able to catch her fast enough. She fell to the ground, her body weak and trembling. Jack knelt beside her, his hands shaking as he helped her back to her feet. Come on, he urged. We're almost there. But it was too late. The plant had already reached the clearing. With a loud guttural hiss, the plant's petals opened wide, and a massive vine shot out like a whip, slamming into the ground just inches from Jack's feet. The ground beneath them trembled as the Plant seemed to sense their desperation, its hunger growing stronger. The time for running was over. They couldn't keep outrunning it. "Lyra, stay close," Jack said, his voice low and intense. His hands were on the weapon, ready to defend them both. But he knew they needed more than just firepower to stop this creature. They needed to destroy it, and fast. Lyra looked up at him, fear in her eyes but determination in her voice. "We can't just run. We have to stop it." Jack nodded, his grip on the weapon tightening. "I know, but I don't know how to kill it yet." "Then we figure it out," she said, pushing herself to her feet again. "You pulled me out once. We'll make it happen." Jack turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. There was something in her, something that told him she wasn't just an alien girl. She was a survivor, just like him. They might have been from different worlds, but they both understood what it meant to fight. The plant's vine lashed out again, faster this time, and Jack barely dodged it. It was relentless, wrapping around the trees and rocks, searching for them. Jack could see the way it moved, like it was alive, like it was thinking. It wasn't just a plant. It was a predator. And they were its prey. "We need to find its weakness," Jack said, his mind racing. "If we don't, we're finished." Lyra scanned the area, her eyes searching for anything that might help. She looked at the plant again, studying its movements. Its patterns. It wasn't just a monster, it was intelligent. And intelligence could be outsmarted. "The roots," Lyra said suddenly, her voice full of certainty. "It's the roots. If we can cut them off, the plant won't be able to move." Jack looked down at her, his eyes widening. It made sense. The plant was rooted to the ground, literally. If they could destroy its connection to the earth, they could stop it. He nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "The weapon. It might be able to do it, but I'll need a distraction." Lyra's gaze hardened. "I'll do it. You go for the roots." Jack hesitated. The plant was strong, and it wasn't going to give up easily. But Lyra was right. This was their only chance. "Stay safe," he said, his voice urgent. "If it gets too close, run." Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed a nearby rock and hurled it toward the plant, the sharp crack of it hitting the vines cutting through the air. The plant recoiled, its focus shifting momentarily toward the new threat. Jack didn't wait. He sprinted toward the plant's roots, his weapon raised. The plant shrieked again, this time with a sound that sent chills down his spine. The vines lashed out, but Jack was faster. He aimed his weapon at the roots, his hand steady despite the panic rising in his chest. He fired, the energy blast slicing through the thick vines with a crackling hum. The plant trembled as one of the roots snapped free, but it wasn't enough. The plant let out a roar of fury and sent several vines shooting out toward Jack, their tips like sharp spears. He dodged one, but another wrapped around his ankle, pulling him to the ground. Lyra screamed as the plant's petals closed in, threatening to trap them both. Jack fought against the vine holding him, his pulse racing as the plant began to pull him toward its deadly center dot with all his strength. Jack pulled free, using the weapon to slice through the vine. The plant hissed in anger, its petals snapping open wider, ready to claim him. But Lyra wasn't done. She rushed forward, grabbing another rock and throwing it directly at the plant's core. The explosion from the impact rattled the plant, and its vines slowed for just a moment. It was all Jack needed. He took his shot, aiming directly at the heart of the plant. The weapon fired, and this time, the blast hit with full force. The plant roared, its roots twitching violently, and then silence. The jungle fell still. For a moment, neither Jack nor Lyra dared to move. Then they saw it, the plant's massive vines slowly withering, its petals folding in on themselves, shriveling up as the life left it. Lyra gasped, her eyes wide in disbelief. "We did it, ... Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He collapsed to the ground, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "Yeah," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "We did." Lyra sat beside him, her breathing still labored, but with a smile beginning to form on her face. They had survived. Against all odds, they had won. Jack looked up at the sky, the stars beginning to twinkle through the trees. He didn't know what the future held for him or for Lyra, but in that moment, it didn't matter. They had made it, together. And that was enough.